Hello friends, welcome back to my channel and to the Whimsical Home series. This is the 7th episode and today we are diving into a fun yet instructional project, sewing a winter quilt and trying to amend my most frequent mistakes. So I've made 3 patchwork blankets before and well, let's just say they've all taught me a lot. Mistakes are inevitable, but this time I really want to learn from them and I hope they can be instructive to you too if you are a beginner. I should add that, despite their flaws, I truly love every one of these blankets. Creating and enjoying them matters more than making them flawlessly perfect, so it's okay if they have mistakes, it's the handmade signature. Let's take a closer look at my most common mistakes. Apparently, my seam allowance is too tiny because my seams tend to open up over time. There's also some pinched fabric, probably because I reuse fabrics with different elasticities, but I also think it has something to do with how I prepare the quilt before sewing. And of course, as a lot of you have noticed, because I was not using a walking foot. We also have beautiful binding in the front, but too baggy at the back. Usually because I don't take enough care of matching the layers. And finally, I make them too small. Well, except the baby quilt that turned out pretty big for a baby and a toddler, so not good at sizing my quilts. I feel like most of the mistakes I've made in the past come from rushing into projects. I get so absorbed in the process that I ended up finishing a whole blanket in about a week. And that usually comes with stress and avoidable mistakes. This time I'm giving myself permission to slow down, to learn properly, to be more careful and to really enjoy each step. And who knows, maybe make some new mistakes. So this is part 1 of the process, the planning, the doubts, the first decisions and the very beginning of the making. Instead of rushing it in 1 week like I usually do, I'm allowing myself 3 or 4 weeks to work slowly and with more care. Now let's talk about colors and inspiration. I wanted a little Christmas touch without going on a full holiday blanket, so I can style it all winter. Think dark and soft greens, earthly tones, something that evokes calm and coziness. These are all the greens I have in my stash. Most of these fabrics were donated or gifted to me or come from old shirts and scraps from other projects, which makes this project much more budget-friendly for me. Now let's look onto the design choices. But first I need to grab my blue light blocking glasses. I've been using this type of glasses for about 6 years now, and my old pair had been repaired and glued so many times they were really at the end of their life. The brand I used to wear no longer makes that model, but Easy Peasy kindly gifted me a new pair to replace them. This isn't sponsored, by the way. After some research, I reached out to them myself to test these because I genuinely can't stand working with screens without these glasses anymore. They've helped me so much with headaches and eye strain, and I thought it might be helpful for you to know that this kind of glasses exist too. I've been looking at different quilt layouts for months now, and I almost decided to make a half square triangle pattern, since a pattern like this is great to work with scrap fabric. But once I laid out the diagram, it felt a bit too noisy and pointy for what I wanted. I imagined something softer, sweeter and more charming. So I went back on the hunt for quilt blocks that had that gentle, whimsical look, and that's when I discovered the Ribbon Star quilt block. It's very similar to an Ohio Star, just with the colors arranged in a different way. To go with it, I chose a simple 9-patch block, a classic but full of charm. And together they make such a lovely pair. I also tried it with a 16-patch block to match the seams, but it feels like too much noise. So here's the first sketch of my quilt. At first, the design looked too green. I already made a full green quilt for the summer, and I wanted this one to feel different. So I decided to add a touch of red. I found 2 old shirts that could go nicely with the greens. There isn't much fabric to work with, so I'll need to be clever with the layout. Usually I dive straight into cutting pieces and end up short on fabric or making more blocks than I needed. Most of the time it works out, but this time I really wanted to plan my blocks more carefully. To help visualize, I used the free version of Canva to sketch the colors and play with the combinations. I'd love to hear what tools or platforms do you use for designing your quilts. Now this design has the right amount of Christmas spirit and cozy enough to belong on a couch of a little countryside cottage. But the seams that didn't quite match were still bothering me. I thought that maybe if I added a frame around each block, they wouldn't stand out as much. I actually liked this version. It felt very cabin-like and comforting. Still, I wanted to explore a little bit more. Then I realized that if I rotated the ribbon star blocks just a little bit, I could make the seams line up with the 9 patch squares. A whole new design came out of that change, but I didn't like it at all. The beauty of each block got lost and everything started to look like crosses. I think it was the color distribution in the blocks that caused that effect. So I played with the colors again and suddenly, with just some color work, a new layout appeared. I really loved this one. Still, after changing the design so many times, I started doubting myself, so I shared a poll with my channel members, and the last design won by a landslide. So, time to make the numbers again. First, I need to figure out the block sizes and seam allowances. I have to admit, sometimes I skip this step or eyeball the measurements, and that's why some of my past blankets ended up smaller or bigger than I planned. This time I really want this quilt to fit a full double bed. I decided to go for a 5x6 layout, 30 blocks in total, so it would look good without being totally overwhelming. I used to cut and sew every piece individually, square by square, triangle by triangle, but as I've been learning and educating myself, I've discovered that there are actually several different methods to cut and sew both half square and quarter square triangles much more efficiently. For half square triangles, I truly recommend Miriam's YouTube channel and her website, stitchobsessed.com. She has amazing resources and very clear charts for cutting as efficiently as possible. But since I changed my design, I now need quarter square triangles. After making a few quilts and patchwork projects, I've picked up some time-saving tricks for cutting fabric. Cutting each piece one by one would take forever, especially for big projects like this. For the 9 patch blocks, I stack my fabrics and cut strips first, then subcut them into squares. And for the quarter square triangles needed for the ribbon star blocks, I also made strips, then cut into big squares and cut these into triangles. Mind that you will have to measure the cutting piece so it matches the original measurements once cut. My rotary cutter isn't the best, even with a new blade, so if you know any affordable cutter you love, please share your recommendations in the comments. With all the pieces finally ready, it's time for my favorite part, sitting down and gently building the blocks. I'm starting with a 9-patch block because it's more familiar to me. I will join groups of 3 squares to make strips and then join these strips. I've learned that for clean results, it helps to press the seam toward the darker fabric whenever possible, and when assembling strips, it's best to alternate the direction of the seams. One strip pressed outward, the next pressed inward. This makes it so much easier to match your seams later on. First, I press the seams open and then press it to the sides. Now, with the right sides together, I join 2 strips, carefully matching the seams. As you can see, one seam is pressed in one direction and the next one in the opposite. This helps the seams nest together and prevents the fabric from shifting under the presser foot while sewing. Look how perfect that is! Since I started using this method, my seams have improved so much. Now let's give it a good press. For these seams, I like to press them just open and then a light press on the front. Let's move on to the other block. I'm starting by pairing the quarter square triangles. Then I'll sew the pairs together to form a full square that matches the size of the 9-patch block. Every tutorial I found for the ribbon star block relied on half square triangles, but because I'm making a rotated version of this block, that method doesn't quite work for me. I also wanted the center to be a full square, since I'm using a patterned fabric instead of a solid color, and that changes the whole construction. So again, I felt a little lost, because I couldn't find any tutorial that showed how to make this exact version of the block efficiently and in multiples. When I feel like this, I just go back to slowly building each block individually, and then the method to make it more efficient eventually comes. I'm going to try and explain how to make this block. As we've seen in the last block, we need to build a square from quarter square triangles, so I pair them up And when I get half double triangles, I pair them up again, matching the seams with each one facing one side. When I have my square with the seams pressed, I trim the excess seam allowance. This will make everything look less bulky. The next steps are easy. I just have to finish the strip by sewing these to the squares and repeat the process until I have 3 strips done. Then I join the pieces with right sides together, and just like that the first blocks are coming to life. I love taking my time with these initial blocks, settling and getting the rhythm before diving into full production mode. Now that I have at least one of each block, I found myself craving some coziness watching the holidays while I sew. By the way, if you're enjoying me sharing all the details of my quilts and projects, you might like becoming a member of the channel. I don't like to talk so much in the videos, so there I share extra info and behind the scenes insights that don't make it into the videos. You will find the link in the description. And if you have some additional tips, please share them in the comment section so everybody can benefit from your knowledge. I always take great interest in reading your comments and advice. To make the blocks more efficiently, I'm going to work on the quarter square triangles in bulk. This saves thread and makes the assembly much quicker later on. I start by preparing the pairs and sewing the seams continuously without cutting the thread. Once I finish a batch, I cut the thread and then I can press several pieces at once. No constant back and forth between the sewing machine and the iron. And this is where I'm going to pause for now. I'll be continuing this quilt slowly over the next few weeks, giving myself the time I usually don't take. Part 2 of the video will come a little later when the quilt is truly ready to be shared. I originally wanted to share both parts of the video in December, but after thinking it through, I realized it was nearly impossible to make the quilt, film, edit, and still keep up with life. This pace feels much healthier for my body and my mind, and I can still share all the little details with you through posts and stories along the way. Thank you for being here, for watching things unfold slowly with me, and for allowing this project to exist without rushing it. Adeu!